You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
Χαίρετε πάντες. Εγώ είμαι η Εσέ και συνομίου στην Μιχαήλ Halcomb. Χαίρε. Σήμερον συναγόμεθα ομού του αναγινώσκην εκ του βιβλίου του Ιωνά. Δείκνυουν συν ο Μιχαήλ την περιοχήν.
Ναι. Ναι. Αυτή στην γράφη.
Σήμερον αναγινωσκόμεθα στίχων έκτον.
Ναι. Ορθώς. Κατέβη.
Σου θέλεις αναγινώσκην?
Ναι, θέλω. Κατέβην εις γέν. Εις ιου μοχλίου αυτές. Κάτοχιου αιώνιου και ανεβέτω φθορά ζωές μου. Κύριε ο Θεός μου.
Εν ταύτε τε περιοχέ, τις είπεν.
Ναι. Καλό ερώτημα. Ναι. Εστιν Ιωνάς, ναι.
Ναι, ορθώς. Ο Ιωνάς προσεύχεται
Ναι.
εν τούτο το στίχο και εν το προτεραίο.
Ναι, πάλιν πιστεύω ότι στην την ψεύδιν την προσευχήν.
Ναι, μιμνέσκω ταύτα. Ναι.
Ναι. Εσύ βλέπεις εν τούτο στίχο στην κατέβην εις γέν.
Ναι, βλέπω.
Κατέβην εις γέν. Πού εστιν τούτο τόπο?
Εγώ νομίζω ότι εν τόπο ο Ιωνάς εστιν εν τεκυλία του κέτους.
Ναι.
Αλ εν τάχα τούτο λέγει περί άδες,
Ναι.
Άβιουσος, ναι.
Ναι. Τότε ο Άβιουσος ουκ εστιν in Ιουδατή υπό κάτω του Ιουδατός. Τάκα Άβιουσος εστιν υπό κάτω του Ιουδατός. Αλλά όδε εστιν Άβιουσος υπό κάτω τις γης, υπό κάτω τις γης.
εν το είδατι υποκατοτέσιες τάχα.
Ναι. Ερώτημα μου πού εστιν άβιουσος, υποκάτω του ύδατος υποκάτω της γης.
Εγώ νομίζω ότι εν το νοή του Ιωνά το είδωρ περί του κόσμου και υπό του κόσμου και εν το κέτι ο Ιωνάς πιστεύει ότι κατέβεν υποκάτω ταινιέν. Διά του ύδατος.
Δύσκολος εστιν.
Ναι, δύσκολος φόδρα.
Ναι, που ο Ιωνάς είπεν κατέβεν κατέβεν εις θάλασσαν. Ναι, άρα είπεν κατέβεν εις γην.
Ναι.
Θαυμαστόν. Ναι, αλλά σήμερον άνθρωποι, χριστιανοί και τα λοιπά πιστεύουν ότι άδεν αβιουσόν ήσιν υποκάτω της γης.
Ναι.
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 Σήμερον πολλοί, αλλά πολλοί πιστεύουν ότι ο Άδες και άβιουσος ουκ εστιν εν το κόσμο, αλλά εκτός του κόσμου.
Ναι.
Οι άνθρωποι εν τον νυν χρόνο τάχα πιστεύουν ότι άβυσος και Άδες και ένα εκτός του κόσμου εισήν, αλλά εν το νοή του Ιωνά και οι λοιποί οι άνθρωποι εν το χρόνο εαυτούς, εν το χρόνο εαυτόν, αυτοί πίστευσαν ότι άβυσος και Άδες υποκάτω ταινιέν. Εγώ νομίζω διαστολέ μεταξύ οι άνθρωποι οι αρχαίοι και οι άνθρωποι μεταξύ των άνθρωπων των αρχαίων και των άνθρωπων εν τον νυν χρόνο.
Εγώ καταλαμβάνω λίγο. Ναι. In νοή μου δόκο ότι άνθρωποι πιστεύουν ότι άδεν Άδες estin hypokato tes ges, que o uranos estin exo exo tu cosmu, ne?
Ne, ne.
Ala Hades uc estin exo tu cosmu, hypocato tes ges estin.
Ne, ego nomizo oti ten diastole, nomizo oti diastole estin oti semeron iu anthropiu, u nomizusin oti ades que aviusos topiu physiciuisin,
Ne,
alla topiu pneumaticiu.
ne, Catalavano alla United Methodist u pistevosin in ade.
Ah,
Ades uc estin.
poliu telusin egvalin
Ne,
ades
ne,
que ienes que
ne.
telusin echin uranos alla telusin echin ades que iena.
Ne. Que semeron oligu anthropu pistevosin oti ades estin uc estin pneumaticos topos pneumatice ne afisme anthropu semeron oligu anthropu semeron pistevosin oti ades estin indocosmo nun, ne?
Ne.
Que ades uc estin endomelondi hypocato tes ges alla estin nun epitengen epiton cosmon, ne? Opiu anthropiu legosin utos cosmos estin Hades.
Utos cosmos estinades. Upistevo tuto.
Upistevo. Oligu anthropiu
Ne.
pistevosin tuto, ne?
Ne. Siu docis oti Hades que ienes isin eafte isin ukisin eafte.
Palin, erotema palin,
Siu docis oti
ne?
Hades que iena isin eafte ukisin eafte. Isin ara estin diastolein 이신 διαστολέ μεταξύ άδες, μεταξύ άδε και γεένες.
Ναι. Πιστεύω ότι γεενά ουκ εστιν άδες.
Ναι.
Γεενά εστιν τις ο λόγος.
Λίμνος,
Γεενά εστιν
λίμνες.
επούλε το άδε. Τε άδε.
Πιούλε, τε άδε.
Ναι, πούλε. Σου καταλαμβάνεις?
Ναι, εισάγει δια πιούλες, εισάγει εις τεν άδεν δια γεενάς.
Ναι, γεενά εστιν πούλε θύρα εις τον αβιουσόν. Ναι.
Καταλαμβάνω.
Και τότε αβιουσός εστιν ο τόπος μετά πώς λέγομεν part, ουμενεύω.
Μέρος.
Μέρος, ευχαριστώ. Άβιουσος εστιν, άβιουσος έχει δύο μέρους. Ναι.
Δύο μέρε.
Δύο μέρε, ευχαριστώ. Και έχει δύο μέρους, αιτητικές πτώσεις, πληθυντικός.
Πληθυντικός εστιν μέρε, τα μέρε.
Αιτητικές.
Ναι, τα μέρε.
Ναι,
Ότι
ευχαριστώ.
ως το μέρος του μέρους, εγώ νομίζω ότι τα μέρε.
Ναι, σου ορθός. Άβιουσος εστιν ο τόπος μετά δύο μέρε και εις τόπος εστιν άδες και δύο τόπος εστιν δεύτερος τόπος εστιν παραδείσος.
Παραδείσος, ο κόλπος του Αβραάμ.
Ναι. Πιστεύω ότι.
Ναι.
Γεενά εστιν πάλι, ναι. Γεενά εστιν θύρα πουλέ εις τον αβιουσόν και ο αβιουσός έχει δύο μέρα και πρώτος άδες και δεύτερος εστιν παραδείσος και ότε ο Ιησούς κατέβην εις αβιουσόν, πιστεύω ότι ο Ιησούς ο Ιησούς ευαγγελίζεται in παραδείσο.
Ναι. Ως εν που γινώσκω λέξεις υπέρ creed, Apostles' Creed.
Ναι, όρθος. Και isten επιστολέν του Πέτρου, τάχα.
Ναι, ναι,
Ναι. Ναι.
ναι. Και,
Εστιν δύσκολος. Εστιν
ναι.
δύσκολος.
Και πόσος τόπος εστιν en Βρετανική hell? Εστιν
Ναι.
εστιν ελίμνε του πυρός, εστιν άδες, άβιουσος, τι σιουτοκής?
Δόκο ότι γεννά, αβιουσός, άδες, παραδείσος, ίσιν different places. Ναι. Και
Διαφορός τόπος, τάχα?
τάχα. Και Sheol estin aviusos, abode of the dead. Ναι.
Εβραϊκέ.
Ναι. Sheol estin aviusos. Ιούκος των νεκρών. Ναι. Αλλά πάλιν άδες εστιν ο τόπος των
Αδικών.
άδες εστιν τόπος των αμαρτιών.
Αμαρτιών, νεκρών αμαρτιών, των νεκρών
Ναι.
των αμαρτιών.
Και παραδείσος εστιν τόπος των Αγίων. Ναι. Και Βρετάνικε, Άγγλικε, ο λόγος hell, δόκο ότι άνθρωποι σεμένωσιν άδες. In Anglice dialecto e Britannice oligo nun, ne? I think Gehenna is sort of a gateway to the abyss, and the abyss is a corridor which ends with two chambers or rooms. One of the rooms in the abyss, by the way, is the same thing as Sheol. It represents the entire underworld, the abode of the dead. And at the end, you have one room, which we call Hades or Hell. I think that's what people think of. That's where the unrighteous dead go, or the sinful dead. And then you have paradise, which is the abode of the holy or the righteous.
Ναι,
And I think those places serve different functions.
Και εν παραδείσο οι δίκαιοι μένουσιν την σωτηρίαν του Θεού και την σωτηρίαν του Χριστού.
Ου μέμνουσιν?
Μένουσιν. Περιμένουσιν. They're waiting.
Ναι. Οι άνθρωποι...
Προστοκούσιν τάχα την σωτηρίαν. Προστοκούσιν.
Ναι, οι άνθρωποι εν παραδείσο έχουν σωτηρίαν.
Αλ ουκ εισιν σιουν το Θεό. Εν τους ουρανίους.
U καταλαμβάνω u πιστεύω.
Ναι. Εγώ, ο Ιησούς κατέβεν,
Κατεβαίνει, ναι.
καταβαίνει εις την γέν, εις το παραδείσο και αναβαίνει εις τους ουρανούς συν εκμαλωτής τάχα.
Ναι, αλλά νιούν εγώ χριστιανός και εγώ μαθητή του Ιησού και εγώ έχω σωτηρία νιούν.
Ναι. Εγώ ου λέγω ότι εμείς που έχουμε σωτηρίαν μόνο λέγω ότι εν τε αρχαία διαθήκη οι δίκαιοι κατεβαίνουσιν εις τον παραδείσον και ο Ιησούς και τούτοι ούτιου οι άνθρωποι προστοκούσιν τον Ιησούν και ο Ιησούς καταβαίνει και ευαγγελίζεται και απάγει συν αυτούς και άγει αυτούς εις τους ουρανούς.
Ο Ιησούς ουκ ευαγγελίζεται άνθρωποι
Ναι. Δαιμόνιους?
Όχι. Ο Ιησούς ουκ είπεν άνθρωποι τι ου πιστεύουσιν. Ο Ιησούς είπεν εγώ ο βασιλεύς.
Ναι.
Πιστεύετε εις με. Πιστεύετε εν μου. Και in όλιγο χρόνο εγώ ανάσταση in Anglican dialecto. Ναι. If I'm understanding you right, I don't think Jesus went and preached to people who needed to hear the message of salvation. I think he went and preached salvation to the captives, and the captives are those who already have salvation.
Right.
And he's simply announcing their victory when he goes to them and telling them, I'm about to be resurrected, and you will be resurrected too.
Yeah, what I wasn't saying is that he was preaching. What I wasn't trying to say, I don't know what I said apparently in Greek, but what I wasn't trying to say was that he was preaching an opportunity for salvation to unrighteous people. I was using salvation more in the terms of like the ultimate final deliverance to the location where their spirits will be with God eternally. Like, and ultimately the resurrection, I guess, would be what I mean there. Like, and I would say that, or at least I believe, or I understand that Jesus went down and he evangelized in the sense of, hey, I'm your king, just like you said, I'm your king. And check your browser, it might be preventing recording. So what I would say is that that Jesus was preaching to those who were the faithful of the old covenant. And I don't know, I think I've always thought that when he ascended, that he took those with him up into heaven. I could be wrong there. But that's the thought that I've had, is that when Jesus ascended into heaven, he took those from paradise into heaven. I'm not sure if that's true, but I also think that he evangelized not only to the righteous dead, but he evangelized to the unrighteous dead, but not an evangelization that leads to salvation, but an evangelization of his kingship and authority to confirm the promises that God made to the unrighteous, that they would be judged, specifically the unrighteous spirits, that were cast down into Tartarus, as Peter says. The Nephilim, or the sons of God who had disobeyed, or, we can go off on a major tangent here, but I couldn't do it in Greek probably.
Well, yeah, I was struggling there at the end to find my way in Greek, and it's, we haven't talked in 4, 5, 6 weeks, so I haven't spoken Greek in a while. But it's always interesting to come back and just sort of on the spot. Usually on a Monday we're like, hey, are we meeting? And we meet, and then it's like Greek overload. So sometimes it's hard to, find the right word or recall the word, and we're like getting into some pretty like heady theological stuff here, and just trying to, make our way through it. I feel like we were understanding each other. It's just I was struggling to find some words, and that's okay. Yeah, but it was interesting. I had no idea the conversation from the verse in Jonah would go this way today.
Yeah.
So that's what I enjoy about it too, because it's just totally on the spot, like not pre-made or pre-practiced or anything like that. Yeah. By the way, just we can wrap up here in a second, but one of those people, I was saying earlier, some people believe that there is no hell, but that it's just right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think Rob Bell, he's a pretty big name, is one of the more notable people who takes that kind of position.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Haven't heard about him in a while, but
yeah. He's interesting. He's all into doing art now. That's kind of his thing. He's been all over the map. Wow.
Well, I hope he's a good artist. Or I hope he has fun with it, at least.
Yeah, right. Well, you want to wrap us up here?
Ναι, εγώ τούτα στην το τέλος. Ευχαριστώ ημίν και ευχαριστώ σου ο Μιχαήλ τούτα στην το τέλος.
Ναι. Τι στην
Ερώστε.
Nah. I could say that in my sleep. Nah. First time ever I've forgotten that one. So, Eroso.
Hello, welcome to Constituent Marking with Fred Long on Proof Text. And things are just getting really interesting here because Paul's in the midst of an argument, and you might want to go back and listen to the preceding episodes, but that's okay. If this is your first time. I'm deploying a marking method, and you can see the legend down below. And this is a way that I navigate the Greek text. This is something I teach in my Koine Greek grammar. It is really helpful. And I begin by looking at connectors. I put boxes around them, which is represented by the green highlight. And here I'm just kind of noticing different connectors, and I see some parallelism right away. I also pay attention to punctuation. That's a good first step. And so I see an un, I put a box around the un, I see a question mark. Then I see a de-ke, and I put boxes around that. I see more punctuation, and then I see a de-ke, okay? So that's what's going on so far. So I begin by noting that there's a question. What is it? What is it? What is it? So therefore, what is it? What do I do? Essentially, what's going on? So therefore, what is going on? And then we see a pras f kome. I will pray. This is from pras f kome. It's a middle form, and it's future. There's a sigma in there, so I single underline pras f kome. I recognize that that's future middle indicative for singular. I pray in my spirit, but also I will pray in regard to my mind. All right. And so basically what's happening is that Paul is going to be building the case that there should be a consonance between spirit and mind. We don't want to be doing stuff that we don't understand. All right? Our faith is a reasoned faith. Our minds are a gift from God, and we need to integrate spirit and mind. And that's what he's saying. So he begins this question. If you look at the verse 14, this is really building upon and drawing a further inference of what we do. If we speak in a tongue, our mind is unfruitful. So what do? He says, well, we will pray in the spirit, and we will also pray with the mind. Okay. And that's what the de and the ke are doing here. Is the de is used in parallel constructions, and it can indicate development, right? A development. Sometimes it's contrastive, sometimes it's not. Here, it's not contrastive. It's saying this is what also we do with the ke, because the ke is adding an also, and so what's happening is that we can see a parallel construction. Here's the parallel elements. I will pray, and then in regard to my spirit, in regard to my mind. So Paul is wanting both to be happening at the same time. And this continues in the next part of that verse. Is he says, solo, I will psalm, and then curly braces, so I single underline solo. I will psalm in my spirit, with respect to my spirit, and also deke, solo, to, ni, noi, with my mind. I will sing psalms also with my mind. So what is it that I need to do? I need to be praying in my spirit and also my mind. I need to be singing in my spirit, but also I will be singing psalms in my mind. So Paul here is advocating for, and this is so critical, for spirit and mind to be coordinated, okay? Not discoordinated, not dissonant, but in concord with each other. And you see, this gets to kind of the heart of the issue that the Corinthians were struggling with, coming out of a pagan, Platonic, dualistic background. And what does that mean? It means that in the Greek worldview, matter and physical stuff is bad, and spirit is good. And in their religious practice, and I can point you to Plato, I can also point you to Iamblichus, and I might have shared that already with you, but basically someone entered into divine inspiration, like being inspired by the gods, by the different spirits out there, people entered into that in such a way that their mind was turned off and that they became like an empty vessel. And then they could be possessed of these different spirits. Okay. That's the language. And in fact, Iamblichus, he's a philosopher describing this in the 3rd century AD, 3rd century. He's describing this by way of signs. Like he's using the same terminology that Paul is using. And, what is a sign? The sign of this, the sign of that. And he's describing different manifestations. When someone is possessed of a spirit, he says, this is Iamblichus. He's a pagan describing what happens here. And so Paul is urging the Corinthians to bring spirit and mind together. That is a Jewish mode of worshiping God, is where your mind is in concert with your spirit. That gives glory to God. Renewal of the mind in concert with spirit. And that's what he's urging here is the restoration, the renewing of the mind, which is found throughout the New Testament, this idea of renewed mind. So, that's how I'd mark this verse. And it's getting really interesting. You want to keep listening and following along. Thanks for doing so. And leave comments, questions, and I'd be glad to address them. Hope to have you watch and listen next time. Hello, welcome to Proof Text, and you are listening and watching Holy Love. I'm Fred Long, and I'm with my good friend, Pat Holley. How are you doing, Pat?
Doing well. I was just thinking that it would be a good opportunity for us to, we've been talking about lust and desire and addiction. And so what if you're in a relationship with somebody who has an addiction and you're not sure how to relate to them from a perspective of love? And so we thought maybe in this episode, it'd be a good opportunity for us to use an actual story or kind of an amalgam of some stories I could put together to describe how to relate to a situation where someone is in an addiction and you really want to love them and care for them, and what do you do? So we could jump into one of those if you want to.
I think that's a great idea. Pat and I are both kind of heady guys. We like to think through things, plan, analyze, pull apart, but rubber hitting the road, putting flesh on the bone, and embodying this, that's really what it's about. Like, how do we embody this love? And, life is messy. And let's say, okay, so this is a scenario. So this is going to be embodying love. The little segment called Embodying Love. We'll do these every now and then, be a scenario. So you have a son who is addicted to something and seems to just also keep asking you for money. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that, Pat? Is that a basic scenario? Is that a real life scenario enough?
That's a great scenario, and I'll just kind of remind our audience that when I do share examples from counseling, I'll change some of the facts to protect the confidentiality of the person, but the concepts and the situations that I talk about are very real, and certainly they're not made up; they're real. So I was working with this one mom whose son was addicted to drugs, and he was addicted to heroin, and he would kind of come and go, and she'd see him every once in a while, and usually when he came back, because he was out of money. He was out of a place to live, and she noticed he's getting into the habit of, she loves her son, so I'll give him some money, I'll give him a place to stay. He comes and stays with me. She give him some money, or she might notice that some money's been missing out of the house, and then she doesn't see him for a few days or a few weeks, and come to find out, of course, he's back into the drugs. And so one of the issues that she and I were talking about, okay, well, you love him, so you want to help provide for him, but in this scenario, what is the best thing really to do for him? And I think So that's kind of a good scenario that we can use to talk about some of the past principles we've talked about with regard to love, to put that in application. So I can tell you how we went about processing it. So in counseling, the way that I think about healthy relationships, and we've kind of alluded to this in the past, I think that the two unhealthy things to do, the two unloving things to do would be to enable the person or to reject the person. Like those two are the two things that we don't want to do. To enable them to become codependent or to reject them. So we're doing something in between.
Rejection sounds pretty easy to understand. Like I think we have an understanding of what it would mean to reject them. Would there, but to enable them, I think that's harder for us to maybe get our minds around.
Yeah. So in this case, we recognized as she and I worked together that she clearly was enabling him. Of course, her desire was pure. It was wonderful. It was loving. She really cared for him and didn't want to see him suffer and didn't want him to not have a place to stay. Didn't want him to not have money for food. So that was good. But at the same time, every time she gave him money and a place to stay, he would use that as a time to either steal from her or to take the money and then, or some object to go sell and use that for drugs and then get strung out again. And he might end up and she might find out about somebody calls her up and says, "Hey, your son's here. He's completely out of it. Come get him." And so that happened numerous times. And so we knew that was enabling. It was enabling because you're giving somebody the things that they want that continue their destructive behaviors. The act of wanting to help that person, the desire to want to give this person money and a place to stay, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. That's loving. But the question is the action that I'm carrying out, is it really good? Is it really good for them? So obviously he's addicted to drugs. He's going to use the money for that. And he's shown that over and over again. So we concluded that giving him money and a place to stay was not the best thing for him. And so what we ended up beginning to try was basically to say to him, okay, look, here's the deal. If you're gonna come and stay with me, you have to abide by these rules, and you have to show me that you're using your money for some meaningful thing, such as to find a job, to get a car, to buy food, or something that would be toward his capacity to self-sustain instead of use it for drugs. And so when we had that conversation, he was unwilling to show the accountability for that. Wow. And so she came back to the session and said, "Well, what do we do about this? He's unwilling to show that he's mad at me for wanting me to hold him accountable for that. What should I do?" And so we talked that through some more, and we basically made the decision that that we would be glad to provide you with money and a place to stay when you're ready for that kind of accountability. And you have to show for every penny of it. When you're ready for that, we'll help you. And so that way she put some stipulations on it. And so the value of the stipulations were because all those things that she wanted for him were good things that he wasn't willing to do for himself. And so now here's part of the dig is that he would do is that he would make her feel bad. You're a terrible mother. You want to look into everything that I'm doing. You're just trying to overrun my life and snoop on me, and you won't trust me with things. And in the past, that would play on her guilt as a mother, and she would internalize that, and she'd say, "Oh gosh, I can't. Yeah, you're right. I should just trust you. I should just give that to you." Of course, that had eroded over time because he had lied to her so many times. And so I helped her to recognize that her guilt was a false guilt, and that she was, by depriving him of these things and providing these things under those conditions, was actually an expression of love. And even though he was telling her that what he was doing was unloving, And so that was able to manipulate her to continue giving him money up until then. So she learned to reroute the feeling of guilt and recognizing that it was a false guilt and that she really was loving him. The other thing we did was we gathered around her some support from other family members and friends who could help affirm that in her, because she felt terrible for withholding from him, who could also come alongside her besides the therapist and say, hey, this is good. This is good. We know you love him, and you're loving him by not giving him this money and by saying you got to be accountable for it. We'll give it to you if you're accountable. And you go, get some counseling or go to some kind of residential program or something like that. So when we did that, he basically, when she set those things in place, he basically said, I'm done with you. And he disappears. And she did not see him for 2 years.
Wow.
2 years.
That's
Because
hard.
he recognized that she was not going to be a source of his addiction anymore. Well, during the 2 years while he was gone, that she didn't know, she couldn't find him. She was looking for him all the time, trying to figure out where he was, and he would never reach out to her. What happened was he ran out of his sources, and he ended up going into some rehab with some other resources from somebody else, and he got his act together. And then he came back at the end of the 2 years and said that the reason he got better was because of his mother, because she wouldn't give it to him. So that obviously there's a lot of details about what happened in those 2 years that we don't have time for me to fill in. So you would see how in that situation, we're using Matthew 18, we're using accountability that doesn't enable a negative behavior.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't reject him, although there were some of his friends who said that she did. You threw him out on the street. You didn't give him anything. He's going to die. Actually, there's a risk that he could have died. That could have happened.
Could have.
But I still think it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do to let him go. The son lets the father lets the prodigal son go. He could have died out there in a pig trough, as far as we know.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think
risky.
love does take that risk. Love does take the risk.
Yeah.
This is the principle I think I would really want to emphasize here. Love takes the risk of turning that person's individuality over to themselves, to ultimately entrust them to their own selves and their own choices. Now, I think it would have been unloving for her to say, nope, you get out of here. I'm not going to help you under any means whatsoever. Forget it. Get your act together. Now, that would have been unloving. What was loving was that she created a path for him. I will help you. You provide, I'll give these things for you if you will show accountability. So she did provide a path for him. That's what sometimes people will do, is that they'll say, you either do this or you're out. And I think that's unloving, but she provided a path for him to be able to, a red carpet actually for him to follow if he wanted to. But because he refused, then she kicked in her conditions for that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, shape up or ship out is one thing that someone could say. But what she did was a harder thing, right? I mean, it's a harder thing to find it's that middle road, right? So to enable, say, oh, it's okay. Like, I got it. You can stay here. Here's $1,000. Or to reject. Those are easy. The hard thing is that what she did, and it really sounds like she needed probably support, right? Because when those are terrible things to hear. You're rejecting me. You don't really trust me. So those are not easy things. You need support, and so that's why love is done in community too, right? So to love,
absolutely.
Like we're not on our own. We have God as a resource, but we also can lean on other people to help us. She needed a reframework, needed some insight. So insight about enabling. She had to be on board about that, of stopping that enablement. So what is it? Stopping it. Is there a way to kind of engage the person. For example, I could imagine saying to the son, well, hey, this has happened 3 times and now, and it hasn't gotten better. What would make, if I helped you in these ways now, what would make it different this time? Or does that just invite you're just being bad to me now? I mean, do you kind of try to have more of those conversations a little bit, or is that just going to be used against you? Because
I think that's great. That's some of those kind of conversations did happen, and that I didn't include in the story that I just told. I think the value of doing what you just described is that you're appealing to their common sense, you're
agency.
appealing to their capacity to make
Yeah.
their own choice,
Yeah.
to look at it from a place of reason, and
Yeah.
then to comment on it. Then if,
Yeah.
in his situation, you say, well, yeah, well, these things happen, and that's why I went down that road, and so it was all justification. You say, I need you to
Yeah.
trust me now, and there was no rational basis for that, but she did give him the opportunity to think it through.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I just don't think that he just didn't have the mental or emotional acuity to even think of something for the sake of something good. Everything was centered in on, how can I get my next hit? And that's not a judgment. That shows you how powerful addictions can be, is because it's the addiction talking,
Yeah.
not logic
Yeah.
and a sense of responsibility.
Yeah. It's blinding and narrowing, constraining. It's not expanding. It's constraining and delimiting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's helpful. Yeah, I do think about the prodigal son story, the parable, which is really about the disgruntled older brother, but there is a prodigal son part of it, and the father just
Yeah.
has to let him go. It's interesting
Yep.
because the father, I think it says that he goes to the end of his boundary and awaits, but he
Yeah.
doesn't know what's happening to that wayward
Yeah.
son.
Yeah. And
So
I know it's a parable, so we don't want to press it too far,
yeah,
but in the story, he doesn't send spies after him and say, what are you doing? How are you spending the money? How are you spending your time?
yeah,
When are you going to come back? We don't have anything like that, and I think we might have referred to this also in the Genesis story too, because we could rewrite a temptation story that involved a codependent God that says, now wait a minute, I don't like this conversation happening between you guys and the serpent. There will be none of that. There will be no conversations
yeah,
going on here. And how
yeah,
many times have I got to tell you, this is the rules for living in the garden? He didn't do that. He let them make their choice and deal with the consequences of their choices. And nothing can
yeah,
teach you about overcoming your own addiction more than having to face the consequences of your addiction. When you face it, then your agency begins to kick in, where you start to realize kind of what you were saying in a previous episode, which is that because sin has consequences, that it tends to have the built-in hangover of, well, it doesn't tend to, it
mhm,
does. It has a built-in hangover of, yeah, that felt good in the moment, but in the long term, this isn't working for me. So that means I have to do something maybe that I don't desire in
yeah,
order ultimately to get what I'm truly destined for, which is to be free from this thing that's compelling me, whatever it might be, and also to enjoy the freedom of giving and receiving love, enjoying that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It leaves you bankrupt. Sinning,
Mm-hmm.
sinning, addictive lifestyle. It leaves one bankrupt. It
Yeah.
doesn't encourage life and freedom. It restricts and takes away the limits. And yeah, so I think it's tricky to love, kind of, right? I mean, in some ways, right? It requires some wisdom, right, to
Yes.
love.
Yes, you could even
Yeah,
say that love is tragic, couldn't you? I mean, couldn't you say that there's a tragic component to love? The when God created beings with free agency, that was tragic, was it not? It was tragic in the sense that there's the possibility that love is going to be violated and to bring evil into the world, and that's exactly what happened. It's
Wow.
tragic, but it also lays the groundwork for a redemptive story afterwards.
Yeah. But the way that you framed that was that it was tragic that God made us with that possibility. That's how
I didn't
you
mean it that
stated it, but I don't think did you mean to say that?
Mm,
You have to go back and listen to that. You said it's tragic when
yeah,
God made us.
you say that love has tragedy built into it. The possibility of tragedy built into it.
Look,
No, it wasn't. I would say just unequivocally, it is not tragic that God created free agents. No, that's not true.
okay.
But
Good.
but it's certainly the possibility of tragedy was built into what it means to love, to give people free will, and that free will might very well be abused and hurt other
Yes.
people too.
So love is definitely risky.
Risky, yes.
It's risky. Yeah, because it's not going to be
Indeed.
welcomed by everybody.
Yes,
And
and
you'll be
we have to make sure not to take the easy
used.
route out, like you said, the easy
Yeah.
route out of just here, I'm washing my hands of you, I reject you, or I just keep giving you this thing over and over again and keep enabling your behavior. Those are the two easy ones to do.
Yeah, I guess I'm just compelled to keep thinking about Jesus's example in his life of loving, and in the scenarios that limited smart scenarios that we do have written, the accounts, and there's a lot of factors involved, but healing people, interacting with people, with hurting people, with powerful people, with failing people. So how to keep looking at those examples, I think, is something that I'm compelled to keep thinking about. Like, if he truly modeled and embodied love, surely the depictions of him that we have, the divinely inspired depictions we have in Scripture, are for should reflect love, in its fullness, complexity, and certainly it was tragic for him. It was very tragic, but there was a redemption. So
Absolutely.
the only way that love is redeemed, it seems, is through God. I mean, I don't know that you can have redemption of love except apart from God. You can have redemption of love with God. Without God, I don't know how you have redemption in love. How it works out, how it can work out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Pat, for walking us through this this love scenario, this embodying love with the addictive prodigal son. We hope that you're finding this helpful, this podcast, and would love you to tell us about that. Any questions you might have. Thank you for listening and watching, and hope to have you listen and watch next time. Take care, everybody.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.